pressing her fingers into his back like wet cement. You will wonder if she looks like you. If you are 2 bedrooms in the same house, did he fall for her features like rearranged furniture when he kisses her? Does she taste like wet paint? You will want to call him. You will go as far as holding the phone in your hand. Imagine telling him unimaginable things like, you are always ticking inside of me and I dream of you more often than I don't. My body is a dead language and you pronounce each word perfectly. Do not call him. Fall asleep to the hum of the VCR. She must make him happy. She must be his favorite place in Minneapolis. You are a souvenir shop where he goes to remember how much people miss him when he's gone. Thank you. Okay, so the funny thing about that poem is nothing. No, just kidding. The funny thing about that poem is that he's still with the same woman. Just kidding. This poem is on the internet. It's on YouTube. And my favorite thing on the entire internet is a response comment to this poem that just says, "But really, who owns a VCR anyway?" Second favorite thing in the entire internet is a response comment to that comment that just says, "I think it was a metaphor for living in the past." Back off, wench. I did not come to the internet to read comments on my own video to be dragged like this. Anyway, all right. This is an older poem. I'm doing a handful of older poems because it just gives you a broad overview of my work, and also I can kind of talk about them later when I talk about how I became a full-time spoken word artist. But this is a poem that was like very instrumental in building my career. It was, it caught a lot of people's interest. It's a persona poem. Persona is Latin for mask. So the idea of a persona poem, and many of you probably know this, is to write from the perspective or point of view of something else. It can be from the gun that shot JFK. It can be from Madonna. It can be from your mother. It can be a persona poem from the perspective of whoever. And this is a persona poem from the perspective of a serial killer's mother. I'm fine. I'm very healthy and sane, just so you know. I caught you once, killing a squirrel in the backyard with a rock. Your 8-year-old body shivering, illuminated. Through tears, you told me that you loved it. I assumed you meant the squirrel. Even after I watched the news, clips of a 10-gallon blue vat being carried out of your building, your refrigerator sealed shut with police tape, the pictures of the boys you kissed too hard. Even after I heard what they found in your refrigerator, 2 human heads and a heart in your freezer, I could not bring myself to call you a monster. Your father told the reporters that when I was pregnant with you, I experienced seizure-like fits. My swollen body would stiffen, foam at the mouth, and my eyes would peel back like paint as if I was trying to look at you. The day your apartment building was gutted and paved over, I began to obsess over your baby pictures. For anything that would predict the way you learned to love seeing things inside out. Your brother legally changed his last name from Dahmer, but I cannot erase the stretch marks. I still see your eyes in my mirror, the scar where they pulled you like Persephone from my stomach. There is no reminiscing here. No one wants to hear how you were a wonderful child. They only want to watch the car crash of your life on repeat, your adolescent obsession with roadkill, how you would bike for miles with a garbage bag filled with whatever cadavers you could find on the street. How could I possibly not see this coming, they say. Did I hold your hand too tightly when we crossed the street? Child, when your father and I fought at night, did you mistake it for lovemaking? Did I teach those fingers to pluck families apart like flower petals? I love you still, darling. Was it the sound of the dead dog's bones as your father dropped them one by one into the bucket that seduced you? Did it sound too much like your pulse? Was it the day I drove away from you, freshly graduated from high school, 2 months premature of your first murder? Did I put too many states between us? Did you put your own heart next to in the freezer next to the thought of me? Would Mary be forsaken if Jesus had not grown to be the son God had intended to father? If he did not wear a crown of thorns, but instead wrapped it around his knuckles, will I be forgiven for the sins I did not commit, but created? When you were small, I told you, you can grow up to be anything. Thank you. Thanks. So that. Oddly enough, that poem really kickstarted my career in terms of the National Poetry performance. I don't know, something. It caught a lot of attention, and therefore I started getting more traction and getting invited to gigs and performances. As of this point, I've performed in 45 of the 50 states, and as well as 7 countries internationally. And that was one of the poems that really started it, weirdly enough. Here's another short poem in honor of Valentine's Day. I heard that some of you were in love, some of you had crushes on people, some of you felt emotions sometimes ever. I've been thinking a lot about how love is not as shiny and as neat and as, cliche as we think it is. Love isn't like a perfectly wrapped bouquet of flowers. Love is like the dirt that you pulled those flowers out of. And that like, true love, true intimacy and vulnerability is letting somebody see you when you don't look beautiful, or letting them smell your morning breath, or letting them see you be imperfect, because you're never going to not disappoint people in life. You always just have to show up and lean into discomfort and try to be better. So this is a love poem about that. Forgive me, but you will get the worst. The sweet foul breath at dawn, crusty eyes, dressing as an old armchair. It seems we save the varnish for strangers, not daring to visit the post office or fetch groceries in such an offensive state. You will get the muck, the cough, the drool, the snarled hair, and even more tangled mouth when I am upset and haven't chosen a name for it yet. Forgive me, but this is my most endangered self, the one unafraid of being unlovable. You built it this way, the shelter I found in the give of your voice, so safe I no longer fear being too much or not enough. Instead, I am allowed, with my unclipped nails, burps and ungraceful curses, split ends and shadowed stains under my eyes, to love you with all that I am. Okay. I'm going to do 3 new page poems that were just written this month. I had a really life-changing experience this month. I was caretaking for my grandmother for 2 weeks, who was on hospice care, and I was with her up to the second that she died. And to be with somebody who was not only unafraid to die, and who leaned really gracefully into the end of her very long, very privileged life, but to support the people around me, it was just a very life-changing experience. And I feel like I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be 60, and the next day I'm going to wake up and be 80. So be mindful that this time of your youth is not going to last forever. So these are 3 poems for my grandmother. While my grandmother waits for death in the other room, her lips cracked as brown sugar, her fingers moving in sleep against the buttons of her nightgown, the women of my family play cards. They forget to eat, cry about past lovers, sort bills and outdated subscriptions. They sit on the floor, taking turns massaging out the grief and answering worried phone calls from neighbors or friends or clergy who sloppily soak the phone with regret. I should have called, but the holidays, you know. There is a camaraderie among women and death. Both know how to become a vigil, to be both busy and still, an usher from one theater to the next. One daughter wore the same clothes for a week. One daughter drove through the night. I was wrong. My grandmother isn't waiting for death, instead drifting in and out of a much softer word. It is the living who wait, who count the hours, the morphine doses, the last requests for ice chips. Yes, it is the living who wait, with their card games and their tears and their own hushed regrets from all the time they had nothing to wait for. My grandmother died of cancer, and something really profound happened was we monitored her pain really well, but there came a point in which her pain we couldn't catch up the pain with the morphine one night. And that night was a very difficult night, but our hospice nurse who came to see us that night at like 2 a.m. said something very profound. She said that cancer hurts and that this is just part of life. And so this is a poem about that. My grandmother moans in pain like a woman in labor, except the woman is sick, so the wails are less like a siren and more the heavy opening of an old door. She gestures at her side for the 100th time. Here is where it hurts, and we can do nothing but tell her again and again that the morphine will work soon. We are the rich, dropping spare change into the open, wanting hands of the needy, throwing tears at an ocean. Her organs loud, desperate, workers who have done but one job their whole life only to be laid off. Her body bleeding the kind of sound I imagine trees make when cut for lumber. It seems no amount of narcotic can catch up to the pain. Hour after hour we hover, 5 women with useless hands trying to siphon poison from a snake bite, but the whole body is a wound. The whole world becomes my grandmother's wailing, and we can do nothing but swear and rub and pace and pet her forehead and chest and arms and allow her to squeeze the hurt into us, knowing all the while that if she were an animal, or even the worst of criminals, she would never have to suffer like this. And the last poem in the Little Grandmother series, and thank you for letting me read them. I know they're a little bit downers, but they're fresh on my mind. So Mary Oliver, does anybody know this poet, Mary Oliver? Yeah, thank you. Mary Oliver is a wonderful poet. She passed away just the same week that my grandmother did, and I've been writing since I was 18. I'm 32 right now. I've been doing this full time for 10 years, basically. And I felt like I committed my whole life to poetry just to lead to this moment that I had with my grandmother. Hours before dawn, I read Mary Oliver poems to my grandmother, my feet propped on the childlike railing of her hospice bed, my thighs turned pincushions, until my voice hoarse, not nearly as dry as the graying woman beside me, being taken slowly, not by cancer, though it has been cruel, but by the slow hardening of dehydration. I read about black bears sticky with honey and roses, their expanding faces unfurrowed by such living frivolities like fear or importance. I must tell you, every poem is about death when you are reading to the dying. Even common words shrug off their working clothes to reveal their true evening desires. Occasionally, my grandmother would raise a spotted hand and ask me to repeat a line as though it were a sunrise or a candy she wished to savor just a little bit longer. Mary Oliver once wrote 3 poems about her dying friend, but they were really more about what particles on earth were shifted or repurposed when that soul was called home. I wondered, do we just stop like the hard click of a cassette player, or do we close our eyes for only a moment to open to new scenery, a new but familiar form like a mama fox or one of her kits or a snowdrift yawning over a field? Her eyes closed by the last poem, I softened my voice to water, my grandmother's breath slowing, deepening, a stream becoming a river, my final words barely a whisper. Without opening her eyes, my grandmother says, "You're drifting away, or maybe I am. I think it's both of us," I say, and then her sleep is real. Okay, one more new poem that's very silly. How many people here have seen the original Jurassic Park movie? Yeah, it's such a great movie. And how many people can visualize Jeff Goldblum right now? Yeah, he's a beautiful, beautiful, weird-looking man. So I'm happily in love right now, and this is a poem for the woman that I'm in love with. It's titled, "For My Girlfriend's Sake, I Hope I Never Meet Jeff Goldblum." We'd obviously become lovers, me and Jeff, and could she even blame me? Hair the color of fine cutlery, supple nostrils, lips that beg to be squeezed like leaves of aloe. No, sadly, there would be no other way. Have you even seen Jurassic Park? Explaining the theory of chaos, that man literally drips sex, water. Have you even seen his chest? The shiny topography, the hood of a freshly waxed Corvette? Tell me again, Mr. Malcolm, how life finds a way and we should probably just find a way into bed together. All the lady dinos got sick of the lesbo action and just wanted a piece of that sweet mouth. That's why they were chasing you, Doctor. Oh, Jeff, it's a good thing we will never meet. I don't actually want to leave her. Not sure if I could handle that again. I know chaos is a hungry toddler. I know electric fences can't keep our animal away, but she is the language I was born fluent in but never spoke aloud until I met her. You were right, Doctor. Life does find a way, but I don't want to find a way without her. I don't want to wait 66 million years to do this again, so I'm going to get it right this time. That's why it has to be you 6'4", bizarrely beautiful bastard. You, who I have never met, who I will never meet, who I will never love, will be the only thing that brings us to extinction. This is another poem that I feel like was instrumental to my career. I stopped performing it for a really long time, and then I brought it back because of things that were happening in the news, happening in my students' lives, happening in my friends' lives, and I just feel very strongly about it. I feel like we are just now getting the tip of the iceberg of what the history of sexual assault and rape is in our country and how it's been a tool used in every war we have ever fought. And I just want to say two things before I start, or three things. One, that if you have experienced sexual assault and you are in the audience right now, I want you to know that I believe you. I stand with you. I don't care who your perpetrator was, whether it was your best friend, a star athlete, or a politician. I don't care. I believe you. I also want to say that in this poem, I wrote it a long time ago, so all the pronouns are she, her. However, we know that sexual assault doesn't discriminate against anyone. Anyone can be a perpetrator and anyone can be a victim. And finally, I want to say, if right now you have this sinking feeling in your heart like, okay, why is she talking about this? Or I don't relate to this, or this makes me uncomfortable, I want you to stop, truly, like so genuinely, I want you to stop and reflect on what a privilege it is to feel like you can't relate to this. And maybe reflect in ways that you can become a better advocate for someone in your life who does. Because I promise you, someone in your life does. Thanks. That was the poem. I'm kidding. We are taught from the moment we leave our pink nurseries that we are collapsible paper dolls. Light to hold, easier to crumple. That as women, our worth lives secretly wrapped in lace and cotton panties, our fragility armored with pepper spray and mace. They say 1 in 10, 1 in 6, 1 in 3 women will be raped or sexually abused in their lifetime, and I am one of 3 daughters. Now imagine each victim is an acrobat. Her sanity, a balancing act. Our response is the unfailing safety net. We never expect to see her across the wire. You weren't just violated, we tell her. You are an empty museum, a gutted monument to what used to hold so much worth. And with the best intentions, we tell her to reclaim it. Put a price tag on your rape and own it, but don't stand too tall, don't act too strong. We will name you denial. Come back when you're ready to crumble, like your bones are made of chalk. You may only laugh cutely or cry beautifully, so cry beautifully. We will catch you, we are calling it theft. As if he could pluck open your ribs like cello strings, pocket your breasts, steal what makes your heart flutter and tack its wings to his wall. Some days you will feel dirty. Some weeks you remember just how hard it is to breathe in public, like your heartbeat is climbing to the attic of your throat only to suicide itself on the pavement. But know this, the person who did this to you is broken, not you. The person who did this to you is out there somewhere choking on the glass of their chest. It is a windshield and his heartbeat is a baseball bat. Regret this, nothing was stolen from you. Your body is not a hand-me-down, and there is nothing that sits inside you holding your worth. No locket that can be seen or touched, ripped from your stomach to be left on the concrete. And I know it's hard to feel perfect when you can't tell an Adam's apple from a fist because some ashtray of a man chose you to play his Eden, but I will not watch you collapse. Thank you. Normally I would just perform all the way through and then do some Q&As, and then the Q&A I would always get asked about like how I started my career. I'm self-employed. I don't have another job. I feel like being self-employed is a lot like a pie chart or a collage, that like writing, I don't just write all day and then send the poems out into the world. I work on a lot of different projects, and I'm going to talk a little about them right now. Okay, so the question is, how do you become a writer? And this is a terrible picture of me that I hate. It's me performing somewhere in 2009, and I hate that photo, but the internet keeps everything. So